everyone. Today, our group is going to present about the corruption of the prison system in America. Year after year, the United States has been an almost larger country like China or India, and more dictatorial countries like Russia or Philippines buys the distinction of having the highest incarceration rate in the world. There are 5 main problems that we want to mention in our presentation today. The first problem is the for-profit prison system, where individuals are physically confined by a third party that is contracted with a government agency. The next problem is the war on drug campaign in the 1970s during the presidency of Richard Nixon. The third problem is the racial disparity in the criminal justice system. The fourth problem is the death penalty, and finally, the last problem is how practical sentencing unfairly to target a certain group of people in our population.
The United States has more people in prison than anywhere else in the world. Almost 2.5 million prisoners are currently behind bars, equivalent to jailing the population of Chicago, America's third largest city. Human rights groups report a majority of them are Latinos and African Americans from poor communities. They're locked away for nonviolent crimes, from buying illegal narcotics to illegally crossing into the United States. Because of overcrowding, the federal government and several states are paying huge sums of money to private prison companies or for-profit prisons to house thousands of inmates. Critics say for every new person that gets locked up, private prisons get richer. As correspondent Mike Kirsch reports, it's led to concerns about inmate care.
Years ago today, this country started a war. The enemy, illegal drugs, and the war is still going on. We asked Cheryl Atkinson to tell us if we're making any progress.
Gina is in a treatment center on Long Island for opiates and crack. Her addictions have landed her in jail and nearly killed her. She even used drugs while pregnant.
It ruins my life pretty much.
Her parents are heroin addicts who met at rehab. Dad Ralph is currently clean.
We have to stop this cycle. It's insanity.
2 generations, casualties long after President Nixon declared the war on drugs 40 years ago.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number 1.
We set out to find just how much has been spent on that war and the results.
This is your brain on drugs.
Back in 1971, the federal drug control budget was $155 million. Today, it's more than $15 billion a year, or after inflation, 17 times higher than 1971. There have been peaks and valleys in drug use over the years, but in recent decades, as the drug-fighting budget has ballooned, drug use hasn't gone down, it's gone up.
The Supreme Court today is hearing a case that could save the life of a death row inmate. Back in 1995, Dwayne Buck killed his former girlfriend and her friend. He's been fighting his death sentence for years, saying it was based in part on racial prejudice. That's because a psychologist told jurors Buck posed a greater threat to society because he was black. Now it looks like the Supreme Court may be willing to give Buck another chance. CBS News Justice reporter Paula Reed joins me now from the Supreme Court. And Paula, I got to ask, why is this back in front of the Supreme Court after all these years?
Jamie, in the state of Texas, before you can sentence someone to the death penalty, a jury needs to assess their future dangerousness. So if you ever got out from a life sentence, how dangerous would you be in the community? And in this case, Buck's own lawyer put on an expert who said not only would he be a danger to the community, he would be an even greater danger because he was black. Now you might ask, what kind of lawyer would do that? Well, a defense attorney who the New York Times called one of the worst defense attorneys of all time. There was a profile done on him. He was known for losing capital cases. 21 years later, finally, Mr. Buck is here before the Supreme Court trying to get not a new trial, but a new sentencing hearing.
And finally tonight, a murder in Texas 29 years ago, an execution 6 years later, and now a report that aims to clear the name of the man who paid for the crime with his life. Ray Suarez has the story and a warning. Some of the images are graphic.
A man entered a gas station on a February night in 1983 in a dangerous neighborhood of Corpus Christi, Texas. The clerk, Wanda Lopez, a poor single mother, was on edge when she called police.
Has he threatened you in any way? Does he have a knife pulled out? Not yet. Is it in his pocket? Hey, get a unit on the 17 to the Shamrock, 2602 South Padre. Got an armed robbery going down right now. Watch his written shit out of him.
The man leaped over the counter, stabbed Lopez in the left breast, and wrestled her to the ground, splattering blood across the walls. An eyewitness saw the man flee. 40 minutes later, police had their suspect, Carlos de Luna. The killer was another man, de Luna insisted, another Carlos Hernandez.
Maybe one day the truth will come out, and I'm hoping it will. Because if I end up getting executed for this purpose, I don't think it's right.
De Luna maintained his innocence at every opportunity, up until Texas executed him 6 years later by lethal injection. Prosecutors claimed Hernandez didn't exist. But while de Luna waited on death row, Hernandez was telling people about the gas station murder. He also used the same kind of knife that killed Lopez to attack other women, including Dina Ibanez.
Carlos was bragging about the other one that he did at the gas station because somebody else was arrested. He will call him his tocayo. And he will laugh about it because he got away with it and somebody else paying for something that he didn't do.
There's new research that shows a continued troubling pattern around prison sentencing and race. Black men who commit the same crimes as white men receive federal prison sentences that are almost 20% longer on average. That's according to new data from the U.S. Sentencing Commission.
Despite media exaggerations, harsher penalties, and a U.S. drug panic in the 1980s, crack is just a smokable derivative of powder cocaine.
President Obama signed a new law at the White House today that will close the long-disputed gap in federal sentencing for crack versus powder cocaine.